Hey ChatGPT, what language was the New Testament of the Bible first written in? Can you please answer in one word?
Hi, Lily J. Greek.
Oh, so Jesus spoke Greek?
No.
Wait, so who wrote the Bible?
Disciples.
Oh, so all the disciples spoke Greek.
No.
What language did they speak then?
Aramaic.
Huh? How are the Gospels written in Greek then? Can you please explain?
The most logical explanation could be that the New Testament was written decades after Jesus by early Christian communities and not by direct eyewitnesses.
Okay, we get it. You've made an entire career out of rigging ChatGPT and then pretending that it's spitting out unbiased facts. Really cute, but let's cut through the nonsense and set the record straight. First century Judea wasn't a linguistic bubble. It was a cultural crossroads where Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek were all in play. Greek in particular was the lingua franca of the Roman Empire, the go-to language for trade, politics, and cross-cultural communication. Stanley Porter, a leading scholar on this topic, argues that Lower Galilee, where Jesus spent most of his life, was the Palestinian region most heavily influenced by Greek. In fact, it was surrounded by Hellenistic culture, earning it the nickname Galilee of the Gentiles. If you wanted to teach, preach, or even sell fish in this region, you need to know some Greek. Now, let's look at some of the biblical evidence. Did Jesus use Greek? The Bible itself gives us a lot of clues. For starters, Acts 6:1 makes a key linguistic distinction between Greek-speaking Jews and Aramaic-speaking Jews. This wasn't just a diaspora thing. Even in Jerusalem, Greek was widely spoken. Also, when Jesus' family fled to Egypt to escape Herod, they didn't land in an Aramaic-speaking bubble. Greek was the dominant language there. There's also the trial before Pilate. When Jesus speaks with Pilate, there's no mention of an interpreter. Pilate wouldn't have spoken Aramaic, and Jesus clearly wasn't speaking Latin. The simplest explanation is they conversed in Greek. There's also the Syrophoenician woman. When Jesus travels to Tyre, a Hellenistic region, he speaks with a Greek-speaking Gentile woman. Again, no interpreter. This suggests that Jesus used Greek directly. The disciples. Several of Jesus' disciples, like Matthew the tax collector, would have needed Greek for their work. Fishermen like Peter, Andrew, and James and John likely used Greek when selling fish in the marketplaces. Let's not forget John 12:20-23, where Greeks approach Philip, a disciple with a Greek name, and he involves Andrew, who also has a Greek name, to take the request to Jesus. Even the crowd in John 7:35 speculates that Jesus might go and teach the Greeks, implying that he could. The Bible's clues are compelling enough, but they're not all that we have. Archaeology and historical records back up the widespread use of Greek in first century Judea. Greek writing, like papyri from the Judean desert, shows Jews using Greek for everything from contracts to letters to religious texts. We also have Jewish literature. The deuterocanonical editions to Daniel are written in Greek. And the original Daniel includes a few Greek words as well. Works like 2nd Esdras and Judith survive mainly in Greek, reflecting Jewish use of Greek for composition and preservation. There's also inscriptions. Porter points out that the most reliable clue about the language spoken by everyday people comes from funerary inscriptions, which show Greek was widely and consistently used in Palestine, especially in Galilee. We even see Greek inscriptions on Jerusalem synagogues. Now, critics love to say the disciples were illiterate nobodies. There's no way that they wrote Gospels in Greek. Really? Let's fact check that for just a second. Mark worked closely with Paul, a Greek-speaking globetrotter. Luke was a doctor, he traveled with Paul, and was probably a Gentile. Matthew, as we said earlier, was a tax collector dealing daily with Roman officials and Greek-speaking traders. John, though a fisherman, came from a family wealthy enough to afford hired servants. He could have had access to scribes, and his Greek shows clear Aramaic influence, simple syntax, limited vocabulary, and the heavy use of chi, like the Aramaic vav. Porter concludes that the evidence overwhelmingly supports the idea that Jesus spoke Greek, at least on occasion, even if it wasn't his primary language. Here's the real irony. Muslims often ask, why are the Gospels in Greek if Jesus spoke Aramaic? But guys, the Quran has the baby Jesus speaking fluent Arabic, a language that didn't even exist in Jesus' time. So what seems more plausible? A first century Jewish teacher using Greek, the global language of his day, to reach a broad audience? Or a first century Jewish baby preaching in a language that wouldn't exist for centuries? You decide.